20 years ago, I joined the Air Force and I went into basic training. I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, but I knew I needed to do this to get away from my city of Los Angeles and do something with my life. I was 24 years old and 20 years flew by. So I got to basic training and I quickly asked myself, what did I get myself into? But I knew I was stuck there and I had to continue to do what I signed up to do. And everybody in my flight was in the same situation, so we helped each other out. We went in as individuals, and 6.5 weeks later, we graduated from basic training as one team, and we were on top of the world. It was a good feeling. But those 6.5 weeks were challenging. My recommendation, if you haven't gone through basic training, is adapt as soon as possible. Ask questions when you need to. Do your best, focus, because you do not want to get recycled. Luckily, I wasn't recycled. Recycled means you go back a week or two because you didn't succeed in one or two things, and that's not a good thing, not in basic training. Your goal is to get out of basic training sooner the better. And if I'm not mistaken, basic training is now 8 or 8.5 weeks, so it's 2 weeks longer, approximately. I left basic training on a bus to go to Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas, where my technical school was. And we're on a bus with maybe 20 other people, guys and girls. And some of these people I had seen throughout basic training, but they were in different flights, so we didn't know each other. We got our freedom back. That was a good thing. We're dressed in blues. We're on a bus. We stopped by maybe an hour into the drive and get breakfast. And people are saying, hey, thanks for your service, even though we had just graduated basic training. I had one stripe on my sleeve. But that freedom felt good. We can buy treats. What was a treat? Maybe a candy or a soda, and that was a good thing and a big deal at the same time because that was taken away from us for about 6.5 weeks, all of basic training. So you meet some new people. At the same time, I had just said goodbye to some friends that I made in basic training because they were going to other bases for different jobs. So you quickly make friends, and that's a good thing. Going back to my technical training, when we in processed, it was 2 people per dorm at that time for the technical training, and I had a few people that rotated in and out. They were either ahead of me or eventually behind me in their training at tech school. So I lived in technical training in my dorm for 1 month, and the reason was because my tech school was for 4 months. If you have a long school and you have a family, you can move them out there. I wouldn't recommend that. I would say just do your technical training. I know you're going to miss them, but you can Skype, you can call every day if you want to your family. Focus on your training, and then when it's time, you can go back home. Maybe do recruiter's assistance for 2 weeks, and that's a good thing. You get to spend 2 extra weeks at your home city if the recruiter can use you. I didn't do that. But a month afterwards, I had my wife and son come into San Angelo. We rented a 1-bedroom apartment, fully furnished with the exception of a television. So we bought a television because we lived there together for 3 months. When we left, we bought that television for $200. We sold it to our neighbor for $100. We didn't want to ship it. I didn't realize that the Air Force would be able to ship items. So the best thing that you can do is get educated from your recruiter or whoever you need to is what entitlements do I have? Will they go back to my home city and pick up my items and ship it to my first base? The answer is yes. I didn't know that, so we sold everything that we had. We'd only been married for a month at that time. We didn't have anything, to be honest with you, except 6 pieces of luggage. I was washed back in technical training once for not passing a course, and that wasn't good because it put the pressure on me. I was embarrassed, but the Air Force knows when you do good and when you don't do good. The Air Force meaning your supervisor, your trainers, whoever that may be. But that was an eye-opening experience for me. And I focused completely all the way till I graduated technical training. We were in San Angelo, Texas. I was there for 4 months total. Then I went back to Los Angeles, my home city, and spent maybe a few days there of leave. And then the Air Force paid for my wife, son, and myself to fly into our first base. When I in process at our first base, we went into lodging. I didn't have any money or a credit card, so I didn't know how that worked. The good news is you show up with your orders, and they'll put you in billeting for up to 10 days. You in process with your unit. A staff sergeant picked me up. I was a firefighter. He was a few years older than me. Very nice guy. They treat you great, the people that you're going to work with in most cases. And they're also going to look at you on how you carry yourself. Are you a young airman? Are you a airman with more experience? And what's your attitude like? So they're observing you as well. So one of the strengths that I think I have is communicating with people. They liked me. They said, hey, welcome to the team. Do you need anything? Well, how can we help you? And I said, well, we need to look for a place. And I said, okay, so you'll get 10 days of house hunting. So that's free time for you to look for a place, which we did. And the comment that I made is, hey, you know what? We don't have a car. So do you have any recommendations? And they have signed an airman, senior airman at the time, who was very helpful, very funny. He took me wherever we needed to go to look at apartments. And we found one quick. We weren't going to get that apartment for maybe a month later, so we stayed in Building Extra. And one of the things you want to do when you get to your first base is make sure that your pay is accurate. Look at your LES, because in most cases it's not. But the Air Force, if you communicate with them, they'll work with you as well. So we found an apartment and we moved into the apartment. When I got to my first unit, there was 2 bases in Alabama. There's Maxwell Air Force Base, which has a flight line, buildings and homes. I was a firefighter. And then there's Gunter Annex, maybe 6 miles down the road. And that's a smaller unit, no flight line there. That's where they assigned me. So I was at the big base for maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, they said, hey, we're going to put you at this other base, which was perfect for me because it was a smaller base, less people, less firefighters at the same time, but I was able to learn at my pace and ask a lot. I'm not mechanically inclined. We had to do a lot of items and things with hydraulics and waters and mechanics. And so I had to make sure that I asked questions, focused. What does this mean? What does that mean? Training. That's when I got to my first base. So here's what I've talked about. Basic training, which was challenging, but you're going to get through it. And basic training is a unique thing because that's a once-in-a-lifetime event in most cases. I actually went through basic training twice. Well, the second one's not basic training, but it's field training when I became an officer, and that was at Lackland Air Force Base as well. Very similar, but there's differences as well. So basic training, tech school, which was 4 months for me, fire academy, I was washed back once, focused. And here's an interesting story. I had many instructors at that time at tech school, but there was one individual who was a staff sergeant, my instructor, and he said, do you want to be here because you're not focused right now? And that was an eye-opening experience as well. Well, I answered to him, of course, and I got a little bit emotional. Yes, I want to be here, so I need you to focus, and that's what he told me. That was in 1996, 20 years ago. In 2005, 9 years later, maybe 2006, 10 years later, I was stationed in Hawaii. I had already commissioned, and I went to a quarterly awards event, and they called out the firefighters from Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. They showed up to the front to receive an award, and he was a master sergeant. So I went up to him, and I said, hey, Sergeant, his name, don't know if you remember me, but I was one of your students, blah, 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 and congratulations on your award. He goes, I remember you, and we talked for a few minutes. Interesting is fast forward 10 years later, in December, 5 months ago, I like to look up people to see where they are, if they're still in, what they're doing on the Air Force Global, which is email. You'll know about that. And he is back at San Angelo. He's a chief, and I sent him an email saying, hey, Chief, congratulations on getting promoted. I was one of your students. I saw you in Hawaii. Just want to say congratulations and Merry Christmas. And he replied, he goes, I remember you. I remember our conversation in Hawaii. Good for you for doing what you're doing in the Air Force, small Air Force. And then my first base. What's interesting is that I live in Aurora, Colorado now for 2 nights out of the week. My roommate, where I stay for 2 nights, his mother was the secretary at the fire department. He was in the Air Force at that time, so was I, and now he's my roommate. Small world, like I said, smaller Air Force. That's how it was when I joined the Air Force 20 years ago today, or next week. So when you leave for a basic training, make the most of it. Ask questions, get to your tech school, learn, save money, spend money, and when you get to your first unit, you're going to meet some great people as well. Take care, make the best of your journey. One thing I forgot to mention is when you get to your first base, if you're single, you're going to go into a dorm, which is very easy because you have your own individual dorm. And in most cases, you'll have a meal card, which means all of your food is taken care of. That's a good thing as well. So it depends if you're single or married, which way you're going to go. If you're married and they have actual openings in base housing, that's another option as well, which I definitely would recommend. That's what we did after 1 year of living in an apartment. Take care.